Regret doesn't always come crashing in, it often drifts in slowly, like dusk dimming the sky. It starts when your presence no longer threads through her daily life, when her hand reaches for your familiar warmth but finds only absence. The rhythm that once connected you both becomes a silent void, and for the first time, she's uncertain if she can ever bring it back. You didn't make a dramatic exit. There were no raised voices, no slammed doors. You simply stopped. You stopped chasing, stopped proving, stopped showing up where your value wasn't seen. That quiet decision, calm, deliberate, was the beginning of her unraveling, because that's when she started to feel the weight of what she had once pushed away. This is the moment we rarely talk about, when a woman realizes she might have lost something real. It doesn't come with fireworks or apologies. It arrives subtly, when the silence stretches longer than expected, when her confidence begins to falter. At first, she was certain. She told herself, you'd come back. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. You always had before. You cared too much to stay silent, to stay gone. That was the story she clung to. But this time, it's different. The hours turned to days, then to distance. You didn't fold. You didn't reach out. And that silence, it wasn't empty, it was powerful. It was a mirror reflecting her assumptions and revealing cracks in her confidence she never expected. Because not everyone collapses under emotional pressure. Some people don't react to soothe others, they remain grounded. They choose peace over control, and you chose power. Not dominance, but true internal strength. You didn't beg to be seen. You didn't turn the ending into a spectacle. You walked away without noise, without need, and that kind of energy. It's rare, especially to someone used to being pursued. Maybe she believed she had the upper hand. Maybe she thought you'd break down eventually. But when you didn't return, when there was no attempt to win her back, that belief began to erode. On the outside, she may still look composed. But within, the questions have started forming. Did I push him too far? Was he more serious than I thought? Is this really the end? The Stoics teach us that peace isn't found in controlling others. It's found in mastering ourselves. And that's exactly what you did. You didn't seek temporary comfort. You sought clarity. You chose dignity. And it's that quiet dignity that now echoes louder in her mind than any words could. Because when a man walks away not with rage, but with resolve, when he no longer needs to explain, prove or perform, that's when she realizes she may have lost someone rare, someone real, someone she never thought would actually let go. And now, that realization lingers not in explosions, but in quiet moments. It creeps in during midnight overthinking, during long pauses before hitting send, during lonely scrolls through old photos, not because you disappeared with fury, but because you disappeared with grace. And that kind of exit, that's unforgettable. But the silence doesn't just linger, it begins to echo in ways she never anticipated. It begins in the quiet of her own mind, where memories resurface without warning. She starts replaying your final moments together, not the dramatic ones, but the subtle interactions, the ones that once felt ordinary, but now seem loaded with meaning. The way you paused before answering her, the distant look in your eyes, the brief hesitation before responding to her touch. These moments come back to her like scenes from a film she can't stop rewinding. She analyzes every word you said, every silence you left hanging. Did your quietness hold a message she failed to understand? Was there a hidden meaning in the stillness between your words? She begins to see patterns in hindsight, pieces of a puzzle she hadn't noticed when the picture was still whole. That's the thing about silence, it invites reflection, and reflection can be brutal. At night, when the world is still and her thoughts have nowhere to hide, that's when your absence becomes the loudest. She replays the tone in your voice, not angry, not pleading, just resolute. You didn't need to say much because your silence said it all. You weren't cold, you were finished. You had nothing left to prove, and that, more than any loud goodbye, stays with her. Most men leave in chaos. They yell, they beg, they plead. Their case, they want to be heard, to make their point, to leave an impression. But you didn't do any of that. You left quietly, with intention, with clarity. No need for dramatics or grand exits. That kind of departure carries weight. It unsettles her more than an explosion ever could because it shows you weren't trying to make a statement. You were just done. She expected one last question. It won. Last attempt? Maybe a message asking, "Is this really the end?" But that message never came. You didn't leave a crack in the door. You didn't leave a thread to pull on. Instead, you let go completely. And that sense of finality, it haunts her now. She lies awake at night, scrolling through old photos, wondering how someone who once cared so deeply could now seem so distant, so untouchable. It doesn't make sense to her, not because she doesn't believe it, but because she never thought. You had it in you. That's the power of calm. Resolve it defies expectations. It shows her you're not the same man she thought she could always reach. You didn't hover. You didn't linger. You didn't send a final message just to be remembered. You left without needing validation. And in doing so, you delivered a message louder than any words. You respected yourself enough to walk away without noise. Oh, that's what real closure looks like. She's left with the memory of a man who chose peace over performance, who didn't need to prove anything as he walked away. And the weight of that realization grows heavier by the day, because it's not anger that echoes in her mind, it's the stillness. It's the dignity. It's the quiet strength of a man who knew his worth and didn't need to be reminded of it by anyone else. Now the comparison begins quietly, subtly, but relentlessly. Every new interaction she has with another man carries an invisible scale. And whether she admits it or not, she's measuring. Not against something flashy or superficial, but against something she didn't know she valued until it was Gnor's presence. Your calm, your grounded energy. The way you didn't try too hard because you didn't need to. She meets new people. She has casual conversations. She might even go on a few dates. Outwardly, she smiles and laughs, just like before. But inside, something doesn't sit right. The connection feels lighter, less anchored. There's no depth, no stillness. And that absence, that quiet void keeps reminding her of you. You didn't chase, you didn't beg for attention. Never played games. You didn't perform. You were simply there, centered, real. And that kind of presence doesn't fade just because you've walked away. In fact, it grows louder in its absence, begins to haunt her in the spaces where noise used to distract. Now, even the smallest things trigger a memory, joke that doesn't land quite the same. A moment of tension where the man across from her reacts impulsively instead of pausing. A smile that feels forced. A conversation that lacks weight. And in each of those moments, your absence becomes more apparent not as a ghost, but as a standard. She starts to see the contrast. You were calm when she was chaotic. You were present when she was testing limits. You didn't fold to keep the peace you stood in your own. That kind of emotional stability, that quiet confidence isn't common. It's rare. And now she's beginning to understand that. You didn't leave behind drama. You left behind balance. You didn't leave echoes of arguments. You left the memory of stillness. And that memory, it's not something that fades easily. Especially not when she's trying to fill the space with people who speak louder, move faster, but carry none of your gravity. She may not miss the version of you who sent morning texts or made her laugh. What she really misses, the thing she only recognizes is the version of you who didn't waver, who didn't react, who didn't lose himself to prove a point. Your detachment wasn't cold, it was composed. Your silence wasn't avoidance, it was reflection. Now, every new connection she tries to build gets quietly measured against the benchmark you unknowingly set. Not because she's trying to replace you, but because she now understands the difference between emotional noise and emotional presence. And that realization, it doesn't come with fireworks. It creeps in during quiet dinners, late-night messages, and unexpected pauses in conversation. It visits her when she least expects it, when the world is moving but something inside her stands still. Because when a man walks away without bitterness, without showmanship, and leaves behind not just silence, but peace, that peace becomes unforgettable. And so do you. Her ego tells her one story, but her emotions quietly whisper another. One moment, she's firm, confident in her independence, convincing herself she's better off. I don't need him, she says. But in the next breath, her thoughts betray. Her questions creep in, uninvited yet persistent. Why hasn't he reached out? Why does his absence feel so loud? Why does it feel like something important is missing? Her pride insists she stay above it all, that showing vulnerability would mean surrender. But deep down, beneath the surface of bravado, something more raw stirs a truth she can't suppress. Her heart starts to ache in silence, a quiet rebellion against the narrative she's trying so hard to uphold. And this conflict within her begins to grow, a subtle tug of war between image and truth. He didn't pull away to provoke her. He didn't retreat out of spite. He stepped back because there was nothing left to give. That's what makes the shift so hard for her to process. She thought time would wear you down, that your silence was temporary, just a pause before the next chapter. But this time, nothing came. No message, no call. No I miss you, just stillness and that silence. It speaks in ways words never could. Each day that passes without a sign from you becomes a reminder that the rules have changed. No longer waiting in the wings, you're not orbiting her world. You've broken the cycle. And that realization sends a ripple through her carefully maintained image of control. It's not just about missing you. It's about recognizing that she no longer has influence over your heart. That's a different kind of grief, one that doesn't scream or sob, it just sits there, quietly unraveling the narrative she believed in. Because now, you're not reacting. You're not proving. You're not trying to change her mind. You're just Ganand, not in a dramatic way. In a final, dignified, resolute way, Marcus Aurelius said, the best revenge is to be unlike him. Who performed the injury? You chose that path. Not to harm, but to heal. Not to punish, but to preserve your peace. And she feels it not as an attack, but as a reckoning. Now, every time she starts to type a message and deletes it, every time she hovers over your name in her contacts, that's the battle playing out. Her ego wants to win. Her heart wants to understand. But neither has the power to reach you now, not. Unless you allow it. You didn't just step back. You let go without needing closure. You didn't need a scene or a finale. You found peace in the quiet, and that's what stays with her. That's what shakes her. Because the man who used to give freely, who once sought understanding, who held space, has changed. He's not acting out of insecurity. He's not looking for validation. He's standing in clarity. And that kind of strength doesn't come with noise. It comes with presence. Now she's left with silence and everything it says. She scrolls, and there you aren't posing, not performing, just living. She didn't expect that. She expected signs of pain, some signal that you were lost without her. But instead, what she finds is unsettling in a different way. Peace. There's no dramatic status update, no indirect quotes aimed at her, no desperation in your eyes, just moments of stillness, presence, and calm. A photo in nature, a peaceful reflection, subtle caption about growth. That's what makes her. Pause. Because in that peace, she sees something more powerful than anything she imagined. Freedom. She checks your profile not because she wants to reconnect, but because she needs reassurance that she's still in your orbit, that some part of you is still waiting. But each time she looks, she finds no trace of the old dance. No breadcrumbs, no open doors. You're no longer hinting. You're no longer hoping. You're simply being. That's what Stoicism teaches. Don't advertise your strength. Be it. And now, that's exactly what she sees. Subtle, but profound. You don't seem like you're pretending to be okay. You are okay. And that shatters the script she was banking on. Most people expect to see bitterness, a veiled message, a sign of unresolved tension. But not from you. Your detachment isn't. Cold, it's centered. And now, your silence echoes louder than any post ever could. She expected a version of you that hovered, that liked her stories, that responded to memories. But that version doesn't exist anymore. Now, you're the man who doesn't need to be seen to feel whole. You're no longer emotionally orbiting. Her space, and that, more than anything, breaks the illusion she held on to. Social media was supposed to be her mirror, a place to confirm her power, to gauge your reaction. But instead, it's become her reckoning. Because while she's searching for signs that you're unraveling, what she finds is the opposite. There is no chaos. There's no signal flare. Just direction, focus, growth. And that unsettles her in ways she can't quite explain. That peaceful stillness you now embody. It reflects a transformation she didn't think you were capable of. Maybe she thought you'd always be the one who cared more, the one who tried harder. But your evolution says otherwise. And that evolution didn't come with noise. It came with clarity. She doesn't see you trying to prove anything. You're not uploading to be noticed. You're uploading because you're aligned. And that authenticity is disarming. It challenges her narrative. Because the man who once seemed so deeply tethered to her now appears untethered, unmoved, whole. And this is where Stoic strength shines. You're not broadcasting your healing, you're living it. You're not announcing your detachment. Simply arrive there, quietly, purposefully. That's what leaves her staring at the screen longer than she admits. Scrolling not for updates, but for answers. She's no longer curious about what you're doing. She's haunted by how you're doing it. Calmly, with intention, with peace. She didn't just lose you, she lost the version of you that could have been hers. Had she seen your value before your silence spoke it, she starts typing, then stops. Her fingers hover over the keyboard, heart racing, breath shallow. The message she wants to send isn't long. Just a few words, a check-in, small window to test if she still matters. But the send button stays, untouched. It's not that she has nothing to say, it's that she's no longer sure where she stands. And that uncertainty, it paralyzes her. The version of you she knew would have responded right away, would have welcomed her curiosity. But this version, this man who has chosen stillness over performance, she can't predict him anymore. That scares her. Her drafts pile up like unread letters never mailed, thoughts she can't express, feelings she can't manage. The space between you used to be filled with noise calls, texts, back and forth energy that kept her feeling connected. But now, there's nothing but silence. And in that silence, the weight of your absence becomes undeniable. You didn't withdraw to get attention. You didn't vanish to make a statement. You simply stopped showing up where you weren't met with the same care you offered. No anger, no blame, just quiet departure. And that quiet hits harder than any. Slammed a door. She replays it all, the final message, the way you used to check in, your steady presence that once felt like home. Now, it's gone. And for the first time, she realizes she can't just step back into your life like before. You didn't leave the door ajar. You closed it gently with intention. Your retreat wasn't dramatic, it was deliberate. And that makes it all the more powerful. The man who used to stretch himself thin just to keep the peace has changed. He no longer bleeds for those who won't tend to the wound. He protects his time, his energy, his peace. That's what she feels now, not your anger, but your boundaries. She wonders if you'd still respond, if the connection could be revived. But every time she gets close to pressing send, something in her stops her. Maybe it's the fear of no reply. Or maybe, deeper still, it's the fear that you've truly moved on. 'Cause silence, when chosen from strength not avoidance, is potent. It says, I know my worth now. I don't chase what doesn't nourish me. I don't wait in places I'm no longer seen. You didn't ghost her. You honored yourself. That's the part she never expected. That the man who once cared so deeply would one day stop trying altogether, not from spite, but from self-respect. And that distinction between abandonment and liberation changes everything. Now every unsent message becomes a monument to a truth she can't avoid. You're no longer emotionally available. You're no longer offering yourself piece by piece, hoping to be chosen. She didn't lose a man who disappeared in a storm. She lost the man who found peace on the other side of it, and that peace speaks louder than any word she never dared to send. Regret doesn't always shout. Sometimes it arrives like a whisper in a quiet room. You don't hear it at first, but you feel it in the stillness, in the gap where your presence used to be. That's how it creeps in, slowly, unseen. And for her, that realization is dawning. It's in the way her voice softens when your name comes up in conversations, and how she pauses before responding, her thoughts lingering a second too long. It's not guilt, it's recognition. She's starting to feel the absence of something solid, something she once dismissed, something real. You're no longer there, and the space you left behind isn't just empty, it's meaningful. Makes her reflect. Stoicism teaches. Let others feel the weight of your absence, not out of revenge, not to punish, but because your presence is a gift hand. It should never be taken for granted. That's what she's beginning to understand. She doesn't admit it, of course, not out loud, at least not yet. But the signs are clear. She laughs, but it doesn't reach her eyes. Conversations go on, but they lack depth. The people around her notice a shift even if they can't quite name it. She's realizing you didn't leave to hurt her, you left to honor yourself. And now she replays the moments she overlooked. The little things. How your energy grounded the chaos. How your presence brought a sense of calm. She didn't see it back then. Maybe she thought it was normal. Maybe she thought it would always be there. But now it's not. And that contrast is deafening. Regret builds in layers. It doesn't slam into you all at once. It creeps in gradually. A song that reminds her of a quiet car ride with you. A photo she stumbles on while scrolling. A friend mentioning your name in passing. All of it becomes a mirror. She's not ready for the reflection. She wonders what you're doing now. It's not because she wants control, but because curiosity is giving way to understanding. Maybe she made the right choice, she tells herself. Maybe letting go was necessary. But then why does it feel so incomplete? That's the part she can't escape. This isn't just about missing someone. It's about recognizing value in hindsight. The kind of value that can't be replaced or replicated. You didn't scream when you left. You didn't post cryptic messages. You didn't play games. You simply stopped showing up where you weren't appreciated. And that's what makes this different. She's not haunted by the breakup. She's haunted by how calmly you let go, by how whole you became in your absence, by how you never begged for clarity, you became the clarity. And now her regret wears many faces. Silence, softened, tone, lingering thoughts. You may never hear her say it, but it's there. That's the power of presence. When it's withdrawn with grace, it leaves a lasting impression. You didn't change to prove anything to her. You evolved because you owed it to yourself. That, above all, is what she regrets losing. Not just the man, but the man you became after she let you go. She used to think she had the upper hand, that no matter how far she pulled back, you'd always reach out, that even if she said nothing, you'd still be there offering forgiveness, offering effort. But now, something's changed. That power she once felt, it's slipping. And it's not because you tried to take control, it's because you stopped handing it over. At first, she didn't notice. She said the same things, did the same dances, waited for your predictable responses. But when they didn't come, when your usual warmth turned into calm indifference, it rattled her. You didn't chase, didn't explain. You simply allowed her to experience the distance she created. That shift unsettled her more than any argument ever could. Because what she doesn't realize is that this wasn't about power, it was about peace. Your peace. You didn't leave to manipulate or provoke. You left to protect the parts of yourself that kept being drained. And that, ironically, is what made her start to panic. Your silence isn't angry, it's centered. Your distance isn't cold, it's conscious. Stoicism teaches us that the highest form of strength isn't dominance, it's detachment from what we can't control. And you embodied that. You stopped trying to be understood by someone who kept choosing confusion. You no longer matched inconsistent energy with effort. You chose stillness over chaos. And now her ego is at war with her emotions. One part of her says she doesn't need you, that she's better off, that you'll come back eventually, just like before. But another part, it's starting to question everything. Why didn't he react? Why hasn't he reached out? What if this really is the end? It's where the fear sets in. Not because you shouted or begged or stormed off, but because you didn't. You walked away with a kind of composure that can't be faked. You made a decision, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. And now every message she drafts and deletes every time she scrolls through your old photos. Every time your name pops into her mind in the quiet moments, that's her battling with herself. Her pride wants to stay silent, but her heart is starting to ache in that silence. She can't say it out loud, not yet, but she feels it. deeply. Because you didn't just walk away. You stopped being available. You stopped being a fallback. You stopped offering your time and energy to someone who treated them like they were unlimited. That's what's hitting her now. She didn't just lose a man who cared. She lost the man who finally realized he was worth more than waiting. Worth more than proving. Worth more than trying to convince someone who didn't choose him fully. Now, her world feels unfamiliar. Not because you took something away, but because you stopped giving what was never truly received. That's the power of a man who walks in alignment with his values. He doesn't punish, he doesn't provoke. He simply lives in truth. And the truth is, she may never feel in control of this again. She doesn't recognize you anymore, and that's exactly what unsettles her. The man she thought she knew, the one she believed would always be available, has changed. You don't respond like you used to. You don't explain, overextend, or wait around hoping to be seen. Shifted not to prove anything to her, but because you finally discovered your worth. It's that quiet transformation. It echoes louder than any message ever could. Growth, when real, doesn't need validation. It just is. At first, she brushed it off. Maybe you were busy. Maybe you were just taking space. But as time went on and the silence held, something clicked. You weren't playing a role in her story. Anymore, you were writing your own. That's when the fear started to settle in. She begins to scroll through her memories of you, comparing them to the version of you she sees now, or perhaps doesn't see at all. No more likes on her stories. No more predictable check-ins. No more holding space for someone who never reciprocated. It's not about bitterness. It's about boundaries. You didn't become distant. You became selective. You tell herself you've changed. Maybe even that you've become cold or indifferent. But deep down, she knows the truth. You've grown. You've become the kind of man who no longer performs for people's comfort. You've stopped auditioning for validation that should have been freely given. And now, she feels it. She feels it in the absence of your attention. She senses it in the way your energy no longer bends to her moods. She notices that where there used to be availability, now there's space. Firm, intentional, peaceful space. That transformation, it's the most unsettling thing of all. Because when a man who used to overgive becomes grounded, when he stops chasing approval and starts embodying presence, it changes the dynamic completely. She may still try to downplay it. She might laugh it off, act unaffected. But inside, she's scrambling to understand who you've become and why she no longer has access. You're not just unavailable. You're unreachable. Not because you've vanished, but because you've risen. And the hardest part? She didn't believe you ever would. She thought she could always find her way back to you. That you'd be standing there, same place, same heart, same open hands. But that version of you is going to not out of malice, but out of maturity. Now she's not just missing a man, she's confronting the loss of the man you've become. Man shaped by silence, anchored in truth, and unwilling to lower his value for temporary affection. Your presence used to be a comfort. Now, your absence is a lesson. She'll feel it not in moments of chaos, but in quiet reflection. In the space where your energy used to be, in the peace you carry now, and while she may never say it aloud, the realization will hit. She didn't just lose someone who loved her. She lost the man who grew beyond needing her validation to know his worth. This is when the truth finally hits her, not with drama, but with a chilling silence. She thought she had time. She assumed you were waiting, just out of sight, still holding on. She believed you were just giving space, not truly moving on. But now, she's starting to see that this silence isn't an act. It's your new reality. You're not waiting anymore. It's not even that you've closed the door with finality. You've simply stopped keeping it open for someone who didn't walk through it when it mattered. And that realization is far more powerful than any words could ever be. You're not standing in place anymore. You've evolved, quietly, gracefully, purposefully, without making a scene or demanding closure. You chose yourself. Not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Not to punish her, but to protect your peace. This is the moment she realizes that you weren't leaving room for her. Return. You weren't holding your breath. You weren't waiting for a message that might never come. You were walking forward, fully and without regret. It terrifies her, because for the first time she isn't sure she can find her way back to you. The man she left behind is no longer standing where she left him. He's become someone else more whole, more centered, more distant. Not emotionally unavailable, but emotionally untethered. And that's what truly frightens her. The absence of need is louder than any confrontation. She scrolls through your social media, looking for signs. It's not of love, but of longing. Not of joy, but of unfinished business. But what she sees unsettles her more. Peace, direction, presence. You're not flaunting happiness, but it's therein. Your stillness, your consistency, your emotional steadiness. You're no longer orbiting her world. You've become your own center of gravity. That kind of detachment isn't easy to understand, especially for someone who expected you to chase, to explain, to wait. But Stoicism teaches us that the highest form of power isn't in holding on, it's in letting go without needing an apology. It's an explanation or an ending that makes sense. She expected you to linger. You didn't. She expected to find you waiting. You weren't. And now, every step you take away from her quiet, confident, grounded goes in her mind as the proof that you've truly chosen peace over longing. She might reach out eventually. Maybe with a message, maybe just a like. But when she does, it will be too late. Because you're not the man who needs to be seen anymore. You've become the man who sees himself clearly. And that's the version of you she never prepared for. She didn't lose the man who begged to stay. She lost the man who walked away without noise, without anger, without a backward glance. And that, more than anything else, is what lingers. Now, your silence wasn't passive. It was powerful. And now she realizes you were never waiting, you were becoming. She doesn't cry in public, and she doesn't confess her regrets out loud. But that doesn't mean she isn't feeling it. Regret doesn't always show up in tears, it often appears in quiet moments. A hesitation before she speaks your name. A softness in her tone that wasn't there before. A long stare into the distance when someone mentions you. These are the invisible signs, the quiet tremors that reveal a storm she's trying to hide. Stoicism teaches us, let others feel the weight of your absence, not to punish, but to honor your value. She didn't understand that at first. Thought your silence was temporary, that you were just pulling away for effect. But as the days became weeks, and the silence remained unbroken, something shifted inside her. That space you used to fill emotionally, mentally, spiritually has become a void she can't ignore. It speaks to her now. Not through noise, but through lack. She tries to drown it out, surrounds herself with friends, distractions, noise. She tells herself she made the right decision, that she's better off. But deep down, in the still moments late at night, early in the morning, your absence begins to whisper the truth. It says he's really gone. That's when the realization begins to settle in, not all at once, but in layers. She remembers your calm presence, the stability you brought, the unwavering energy that grounded her when she was lost in her own storms. She recalls how you didn't need to control her or chase her to offer support, you simply were. But now you're not. And that difference is jarring. Conversations that once flowed now feel forced. Laughter doesn't come as easily. Even those around her sense the change, though no one says it aloud. She's carrying a weight she doesn't fully understand, a weight created not by your actions, but by your absence. And that's the beauty of your silence. You didn't break it to ease her confusion. You didn't rush to explain or fix anything. You honored yourself. You let the stillness speak for you. And slowly, it has started to reshape her memories, not through manipulation, but through clarity. Now she sees it. You weren't needy, you were devoted. You weren't weak, you were patient. And while she might have overlooked your strength while you were there, in your absence, it's become undeniable. The version of you she once had access to is no longer available. Not because you changed who you are, but because you stopped offering yourself where you weren't valued. You didn't shut the door with a dramatic gesture, simply stopped holding it open. And that quiet closing, it speaks volumes. Now, even if she never admits it, the regret lives in her daily routine. In the pause before she texts you and decides not to, in the way she softens when your name comes up, In the subtle shift of energy every time she remembers that your calm, grounded presence is no longer part of her world. You didn't leave to teach her a lesson, but she's learning anyway. And the lesson is simple. The man she took for granted was rare, and now that he's gone, nothing feels quite the same. She used to feel like she held all the cards, that she had control not just over the situation, but over your emotions. Gave her confidence, a sense of certainty that no matter what happened, you'd still be there, offering your time, attention, and forgiveness like clockwork. But now, that control is slipping through her fingers like sand. It didn't happen in one grand moment. It unfolded slowly, almost imperceptibly, until it was too obvious to ignore. You didn't argue. You didn't beg. You didn't match her indifference with desperation. You simply stopped. Stopped over-explaining. Stopped reaching out first. Stopped showing up in places where your presence wasn't reciprocated. And that subtle shift shook the very foundation of her confidence. She second-guesses herself now. Words that once rolled off her tongue without thought are now filtered through hesitation. Every delayed reply, every moment of distance on your part, now feels deliberate, heavy with meaning. She starts wondering, did he finally figure me out? Did he finally stop waiting? And that's the power of your calm. Stoic detachment isn't about bitterness, it's about alignment. You didn't create distance to punish her, created it to preserve your standards, to protect the peace you had to rebuild after being worn down by inconsistency. You stopped trying to convince someone of your worth, because you finally realized it was never up for debate. And while she may not say it aloud, she senses the shift. She scrolls through old messages, replays past conversations, analyzes the tone in your voice from weeks ago, trying to find the exact moment she lost control. Because now, every interaction carries an uncertainty she's not used to. You're no longer emotionally predictable. You're no longer tethered to her whims. That scares her, because once upon a time, she could push and pull at will. She finds herself alone in the tug-of-war, pulling on a rope that no longer has tension. You've let go and done so gracefully. This is what Stoicism calls apatheia, state of inner calm, undisturbed by external chaos. You're not detached because you stopped caring. You're detached because you started caring for yourself more. You're not unreachable, you're just no longer easily swayed. She tests the waters. A delayed message here. A subtle social media post there. She's looking for signs, indication that she still has a hold on you. But what she sees instead is a man who is grounded, present, unmoved. She begins to realize that the emotional game she once played no longer has a willing participant. And in that moment, fear replaces confidence. She didn't just lose your attention. She lost access to your energy, your calm, your presence, your loyalty. That's not something easily replaced. You didn't walk away in anger. You walked away with discipline, and that makes all the difference. Now the silence is no longer just absent sights a boundary, and she knows somewhere deep down that crossing it won't be as easy as before, because you're not just gone. You've outgrown who you were with her. She thought she knew who you were, thought she could predict your every move, your reactions, your patterns. But that version of youth, the one who waited, who over-explained, who held on hoping she'd recognize your worth, he's gone, and what's replaced him as something she can't quite grasp. You're not the same. Not because you changed who you are, but because you grew into the man you were always meant to be. And that growth, it unsettles her. You don't react to provocation anymore. You don't scramble for validation. You're not performing in hopes of being seen. Now, you're just focused anchored. That inner transformation, quiet and unannounced, has created a ripple in her reality. Growth is a foreign language to those who remain stagnant. And to her, your evolution speaks in tones she's never understood. She expected you to stay rooted in the version of yourself that gave endlessly. But instead, you evolved. You became more selective with your energy, more deliberate with your presence. You no longer show up just because she called. And it's that subtle refusal to be pulled back in that gets to her. She notices, it's not in the obvious ways. There's no big announcement, no loud declarations, but in the silence. In the way you no longer view her stories, no longer reach out. On birthdays, no longer occupy that emotional space she used to take for granted. You've disappeared from her radar, out of anger, but out of clarity. Stoic man doesn't announce his growth, he simply lives it, and that lived experience becomes a reflection she wasn't prepared to see. She sees it in the way you speak, the peace in your eyes, the lack of urgency in your movement. You're not chasing anything, you're simply moving forward. And that forward motion makes her pause. She may tell herself you've changed for the worse, that you've grown cold, distant, selfish, but deep down she knows the truth. You've stopped performing. You've stopped trying to fit into a space that didn't value your wholeness. You've stopped making room for someone who never made room for you. And that truth, it stings more than she expected, because it means she didn't just lose. Man, she lost a version of herself that felt safe when you were still reaching back. Now she's left with a memory that grows dimmer each day, and a realization that your absence speaks to a level of strength she never truly understood. You've become someone she can no longer access. It's not because you're hiding, but because you've outgrown the place she kept you in. And now, the question lingers in her mind, not who you were, but who you've become. And whether she ever crossed paths with that version of you again. The answer, of course, lies not in her hands, but in yours. And by now you've learned not to offer yourself to those who only notice your value in your absence. She assumed you'd always be within Ricky, emotionally parked in the place where she last left you. But you didn't stay there. You didn't wait. You didn't freeze in time, hoping for her return. Instead, you grew. You moved. You changed. Not for her, not for validation, but for yourself. This realization doesn't come to her all at once. It creeps in slowly, like shadows lengthening at sunset. One day she scrolls past a quote you used to like, and it feels different. Another day, she checks your name in her contacts and wonders if she should send a message, but doesn't. And each of these moments adds weight to the growing truth. You are no longer waiting for her. She expected a man who would keep the door slightly ajar, just in case. But instead, you closed it not with spite or bitterness, but with peace. You didn't announce your departure. You didn't ask her to understand. You simply stopped holding space in a place that never nurtured you. And that silence, it echoes. She feels it not just the loss of you, but the loss of her grip. She can't predict you anymore. You can't sense your energy hovering nearby. She's used to being the center of gravity. But now, it's as if your world has shifted orbit, and she's no longer in it. She replays the past, not for nostalgia, but for understanding. She wonders what moment marked the turning point. Was it when she withheld affection, assuming you'd chase? Was it when she tested your patience one too many times? Or maybe it wasn't a moment, it was the accumulation of them? Tiny dismissals, subtle neglect, a growing pattern of emotional absence on her end? And finally, you responded with distance. You didn't make it a scene. You didn't make it a lesson. You made it a boundary. And that's what she struggles with most. The quiet dignity of your detachment. Because it wasn't meant to provoke. It was meant to protect. Now, she watches from afar, maybe through your social media, maybe through mutual friends, but always with a growing sense that she no longer knows who you are. Not truly, because the man she once knew wouldn't have walked away. But the man you've become, he couldn't stay in that shift. It terrifies her. She doesn't miss the man who clung. She misses the man who stayed grounded. It's the one who brought calm to her chaos, presence to her uncertainty. But she never nurtured that presence. And now it's gone. When a man learns to value his peace more than the illusion of being needed, he becomes unreachable in the best way. Not because he's hiding, but because he's healed. And that's the version of you she never saw coming. So as she sits, with her silence, you walk forward. No backward glances, no open invitations. It's just the quiet strength of a man who finally realized he was never meant to wait in limbo. And that realization, the finality of it, is what lingers most. She used to feel in control, certain of your feelings, confident in your patience, secure in the idea that no matter what she did, you'd still be there. But now the balance has shifted. The upper hand she once held so firmly slips through, her grasp like sand. The more she tries to grip it, the faster it falls away. This change wasn't sudden, it came quietly, wrapped in your restraint. You no longer rushed to respond, to explain, or to chase. You didn't match her inconsistency with increased effort. Instead, you responded with calm stillness that spoke louder than any argument ever could. And that subtle change changed everything. She thought you'd never walk away. She thought you needed her validation. But when you stopped trying to convince her of your worth, she began to question her own. Your silence wasn't passive. It was powerful. It wasn't about giving up. It was about letting go of what no longer honored your peace. And now, her thoughts are no longer steady. They're restless. Now, she wonders what you're thinking, how you're feeling, and if you've really moved on. She replays conversations, rereads old messages, hoping to find clues. But she finds none, only more silence. She tests the water's subtle texts, likes on your stories, maybe even a casual "how are you?" But your response, if it comes at all, is polite, grounded, detached. You've changed, and she can feel it. You no longer meet her breadcrumbs. With a feast, you don't engage just to keep the peace. And that unshakable presence, the one that once comforted her, is now unsettling, because now she's not sure where she stands. The man who once gave without asking now protects his energy like a priceless treasure. She's beginning to realize it might be too late. What rattles her most is the unknown. She can't predict your reactions anymore. She can't rely on emotional patterns you once followed. You've become centered, composed, untethered from the emotional strings she used to pull so easily. You don't ignore her to play games. Simply no longer react from a place of need. You found your center, and from that place of calm, you move with intention. No anger, no malice, just clarity. That kind of presence is rare. It's what Stoics call apatheia, not apathy, but inner peace, untouched by chaos. That's the hardest part for her to accept. You didn't detach to punish. You detached to preserve. Now in the quiet she once mistook for submission, she hears truth, and it unsettles her. Because what she feels now isn't just the absence of your attention, it's the absence of her power. And in that space where control used to live, only your calm remains. There's a moment she didn't prepare for when admiration replaces certainty. She used to be so sure of you, sure you'd wait, sure you'd reach out, sure you'd stay soft, no matter how cold she became. But now, watching you from a distance, she doesn't just see change, she sees growth. And that growth commands respect, even if she won't admit it. You used to explain yourself, trying to bridge the emotional distance. You offered clarity, even when none was given to you in return. But that version of you no longer exists. Now you move with quiet direction, detached not out of bitterness, but out of purpose. You've learned that not everyone deserves access to your energy. And in that lesson, you found strength. This evolution unsettles her, because what she sees now isn't someone playing a role, it's a man who's simply living, unburdened. You're not broadcasting transformation, you're embodying it. And ironically, the more you stop performing, the more she notices you. Not as someone to control, but as someone she can no longer reach. That admiration grows in silence. It shows, up in her hesitation, in the way she pauses when someone brings up your name, in the moments when her laughter fades too quickly, because you've become the standard she now measures others against. You didn't have to be loud. Your composure said it all. When a man stops needing to prove, he becomes magnetic. It's not through effort, but through presence. You've stopped orbiting her world, and she can feel it. There's no emotional pull. Anymore, no expectation, just a man who has stepped fully into his own timeline, and that scares her. She's not used to men evolving beyond her reach. She's used to being the one who decides when things are over. But this time, the story didn't end with a confrontation. It ended in your clarity. You didn't slam the door, you simply stopped standing in the doorway. That kind of ending lingers longer, because it doesn't leave pieces to pick up. It leaves space that once was filled with your consistency, your warmth, your availability. And now, that space echoes with questions she can't answer. Does he still think about me? Has he really let go? Was I ever enough for him? You're no longer haunted by those questions, but now they've become hers. And the more grounded you remain, the louder those questions become. You didn't just walk away, You redefined what it means to value yourself. In doing so, you showed her something she's rarely seen, a man who chose peace without needing permission. A man who didn't leave to teach a lesson, but to protect his own spirit. And that is what haunts her most. Because in a world full of noise, your stillness is unforgettable. Let's pick up where we left off. The realization that silence carries more weight than any words ever could. Now, she's beginning to live with that weight. It's not loud or chaotic, subtle but persistent, like a quiet hum in the background of her daily life. Every time she scrolls past your name, every time she tells herself she made the right choice, there's a tiny pause, a flicker of doubt, because somewhere deep inside she knows you're not who you used to be. You're not the man who needed her attention to feel seen. You're the man who stood tall in the echo of abandonment and chose clarity over confusion. And the more she sees that in you, the more her grip on control loosens. Because control can only exist when someone still plays the game. But you've stepped off that board entirely. She begins to notice how much lighter your energy feels. It's not performative. You're not showing off or proving a point. You're just living fully, honestly, and above all, freely. That's what startles her most. Not your distance, but your freedom. And that's when the fear truly sets in. Not the fear of being alone, but the fear of having underestimated you. She didn't expect this version of you composed, grounded, untouchable, to emerge from the silence. She expected anger, confusion, maybe even attempts to win her back. But instead, you gave her stillness. And in that stillness, you became unforgettable. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say or think or do. Only what you do." That's the essence of what you've become. A man at peace with himself. And no apology, no delayed realization can undo the quiet evolution that's taken place inside you. She might still send the message. Maybe she won't. But either way, she now knows what she lost. Not because you told her, but because she felt it. And that, above all else, is what lingers. You didn't leave to hurt her. You left to return to yourself. And in that return, you found the kind of strength no one can take away. So if you've walked this path, if you've chosen peace over performance, dignity over desperation, just remember this. The silence you chose wasn't empty. It was powerful. It was defining. It was yours. That's the final lesson. Maybe, just maybe, the one she'll never forget.